Why don't we go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's event. I'm Laura Dillon, Dynamic World, and we're here today for a session all about the migration journey from Adxstudio Portals to Dynamics 365 Portals. Our presenter today is Kunal Tripathy with KPMG Adoxio, and it's just really great to have him here with us today. So as we get started, please know that we do welcome your questions. You can enter them in at any time during the presentation in the Q&A box that you'll see over on the right side of the event window. I know Kunal will be trying to take a few questions as he goes through his presentation, but if he doesn't get to them during it, then he will tackle them at the end. So please feel free to enter those because we do welcome the interaction. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand things off to Kunal to get us started.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. I am here joining from Calgary, and it's right afternoon, 12 o'clock. Okay, so today the topic of the session is migration journey. So we will look into Adxstudio Portals. Before we get to that, let me talk about myself. I'm Kunal Tripathy. I'm technical team lead working at KPMG Adoxio. I have been with the team, not the company, but the team, since Adxstudio days, and then Adoxio, and then KPMG Adoxio now, has been through all the transition. I am an avid blogger. I blog about integration, data migration. That's the area of my expertise. My blogs are available at my site, kunaltripathy.com, and you can also follow me on Twitter. I am K. Tripathy. As my focus is integration, data migration, this is my take on migrating or say upgrading from Adxstudio Portals to Dynamics 365 version 9 using data migration tool. All right, a lot of topic to cover today. We are going to talk about Adxstudio Portal, look what was there and where it ended and where things are now. We'll talk about Dynamics 365 Portals. We'll get into the details and the mapping between the Adxstudio Portals and Dynamics 365 Portals. We'll look into what are the options you currently have if you are still using Adxstudio Portals, okay, and what portals options you can use. And we'll get into actual upgrade. So we will actually take a community Adxstudio Portal and upgrade it to Dynamics 365 in this session. So we don't have a lot of time, so let's get started. A reminder, everyone, I will be taking questions, so feel free to log your questions as I'm going through, okay? And I will try to answer them if I can in between the session. If not, we'll tackle them towards the end. Okay. Laura, are you able to hear my audio perfectly fine?
Yes, I can, and I'm opening the first poll question for you.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Yes, so we do have a poll question. We are just trying to understand what version of CRM, what version of portals you guys are currently using, and that will give me a good gauge of the audience we have currently today. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's get started where it all got started, Adxstudio Portals. Quite some time back when CRM 4, Adxstudio launched XRM extensions for the portals. Those extension was the first step to a long iterative process. The portals itself has gone through a lot of iteration. It went from XRM extensions to BA portal solutions. On CRM 4, it went to 2011. So as the CRM has evolved and the portals have evolved. One of the main reasons one thing that I wanted to highlight in the slide that you currently see is we started with a customization-based solution. So XRM extension was a framework or a template which allows you to have your own custom pages or the customization in the solution. But we have always been on a journey to more a configuration-based solution. So as the new features were getting added, those features were always more a configuration-based features. We always allowed customization. There was never a limitation on not having the customization, but that was the approach. Okay. The last version of the portal which came out was in 2015. So in 2015, The last version of Portal with Adxstudio came out, and that's when Microsoft acquired Adxstudio Portal, the product and the brand. Since the acquisition, Microsoft released the first version of Portal in May 2016. That was Portal version 8.1. With the new version, there were some of the new features, new things, but then there were some of the changes. One of the major changes that Microsoft did was it decided how the portal has to be hosted. So it was a self-hosted solution, and there was no option for you to install it on-premise. It's good in some case because you don't have to worry about the hosting, but then it could be a challenge for someone if you are on-premise or you are not going online because of restriction or regulation. Microsoft itself has released multiple versions of it. Microsoft is currently releasing a version every month. So every month there is a new version of Portal coming out. The current version which Microsoft has released, the major version is 9, and if I'm right, the sub version is 9.2. Okay. Now with Dynamics 365 Portal, one of the things Microsoft did was no customizations. So there was no .NET framework, no CRM SDK, no C# coding. Okay. Those channels of modification was locked off. The options for achieving those channels were through liquid templating, liquid configuration, and such and such. Okay. This could be a challenge for some of you, but that was one of the major changes.
Hey, Kunal, we have a question already. Do you mind if I ask it?
Sure.
In the chat box, the question is there a robust method for moving the portal between dev and production instances?
I will take that question towards the end and we'll talk more about it. There are methods, but and they are not catered for every implementation. So there is not one process which you can use for migration from one. We used to have long back ALM toolkit, which used to do that. Since the ALM toolkit is no more supported and it's deprecated, that option is not there. Microsoft does have configuration migration tool that you can use, and there is an open source version of DevOps which is released by Adoxio, which can be configured to implement that kind of promotions. Okay.
Okay.
We'll
great.
talk more about this towards the end.
Okay.
Great question. Okay. So if I go back to the roadmap, and if you look into it, we had Adxstudio Portal version 7, and the last version of it came out by Adxstudio in 7.21. I still jumble between Adxstudio and Adxstudio. Microsoft has been releasing patches for these versions, and these patches were primarily bug fixes. Some of the changes that they adopted in the new version was released in the version 7 as well. Okay. The last version that Microsoft released was 7.26. In the time being, the portal capabilities for Dynamics 365, now this has gone through multiple name changes. So it was called CRM Portals, it was called Dynamics 365 Portals, and currently it is called Portal Capabilities for Dynamics 365. The first version came out in May 2016, 8.1, and currently we are on version 9. Now, one of the interesting things which happened was in July 2017, Microsoft released a one-time open source portal. So they actually released the 8.3 source code. And source code means this was the first time a complete source code was released for the Adxstudio Portal. They released not only the master portal samples, but they also released the source code for the assemblies which drive these portals. So everything was made open source, and it was just a one-time release. It was released in an MIT license. MIT is as open source it can get. Okay, it's a complete open source code. You can take it and do everything with it. Now, one very different thing Microsoft did compared to what you generally see with the open source code is they released it on the download center. Most of the time, the open source code comes on a public repository like GitHub, okay, which allows others to contribute, make modification, pull a branch, make changes. That has changed. Okay. So what Adxstudio did was Adxstudio came up with XRM Portals Community Edition, which was basically a copy of open source Portal. And community and Adxstudio have been providing support to this version of the portal. so far. So it has been regularly going through some bug fixes, some updates. A lot of bug fixes are made by Adxstudio. As Adxstudio gets aware of any bugs which are available, we make fix to it. Apart from that, community makes the contribution. So if there are devs out there who make changes or fix, those changes and fixes are validated by Adxstudio and included in the master branch. Okay, so these are the 4 different flavors of the portals we currently have. Now, the first question, okay, so we have 4 flavors, but are they supported? Do I have support, and where do the support lies? Of the 4 versions, the only 2 versions which has some support is Portals by Microsoft, which is Dynamics 365 Portals capabilities, and the other version being XRM Portals Community Edition. Portals by Microsoft is obviously supported by Microsoft, and XRM Portals Community Edition is supported by Adxstudio and the community. The other 2 versions, which is Adxstudio Portal, so you might be having install of it, and you might have a perpetual license for this, but its source code is not available, and it's no more supported. So you can get a partner or a third-party vendor who might be able to provide the support for it, but in actual, it's not getting any bug fixes, no more further release, and no other details. Okay. Microsoft open source portals, that portal was one-time release. It's kind of a stepping stone to move to other version, and it's not supported by Microsoft or Adxstudio. This portal is also, you can get support for it through a third-party vendor based to case basis, but that's where things are. All right, so what are my options? 4 portals, what are my options? Realistically speaking, there is only one option. You need to migrate to Dynamics 365 portal capabilities if you want one of the portals, or you want portal capabilities with Dynamics 365. Okay. Those are the options. If that is not the plan, you will need to look into other solutions out there. Okay. All other flavor of portals are just for time being. So say, for example, you want to go Dynamics 365 portal, but you are not ready, right? You can be on other flavors of portal until you get ready for that. Okay. If you are looking into open source code version, it's just a stepping stone for you to upgrade to CRM portals. The other option is XRM Portals Community Edition. If your need is longer than a stepping stone, you need some, so because the license have expired, you can't be on Adxstudio Portal, and you need to be on another version of Portal until you get ready to go to online, or say, for example, you are waiting for some of the features which don't exist currently in Dynamics 365, and you're waiting for those features to be available, you can be on XRM Portals Community Edition. But this is just a short-term phased option for you rather than a long-term solution. Okay. Adxstudio Portals, if you have a perpetual license, not many people have. If you have, you can be on Adxstudio Portal. Okay. It's not supported by Microsoft or the community, so you'll not be getting any bug fixes or patching, and you're responsible for maintaining those. But it is a self-hosted solution, and then you can still have it if you have support. Either your team is supporting the portal, or the communities, or you have a third-party vendor or a partner supporting the portal install that you have. Adxstudio Portal has been great. It works. It does the work now. The main challenge will be the bug fixes and the support on online. So say, for example, you have Adxstudio Portal and you are on CRM online, then you have limited support, because anytime the plug could be pulled out where Adxstudio Portals could not be installed on version 9 anymore. Last week I was actually trying to install Adxstudio Portal on version 9, and I was getting some errors. I believe that is just because of a bug, but in future it might happen that Adxstudio Portals can't be installed on Dynamics 365. Okay. I see some question here. From Joe. Do Adxstudio provide interim support for 7 while the upgrade to 365 portal? Yes, Adxstudio does provide that support. You will have to get in touch with the sales team. I'll have the details towards the end of the session. we do provide support on case-to-case basis. Okay. Is the open source portal available to use with legacy version of Dynamics 365 in 2013? I have a client on version 7 but need to upgrade to remain supported. My understanding is 8.3 version of source code is only supported on 8.1 CRM, so 2016 or after. So you will have to upgrade from Dynamics 365 2013 to 2016 in order to continue using XRM community or the open source code. Okay, thanks, Jill. Great questions. All right. So let's do a comparison because our focus of this session is to more about how to do about the upgrading. Okay. Adxstudio Portals had 8 different flavors of it, so 8 different websites, basic, community, company, and many others. Dynamics 365 Portals, they came up with 5. So there were 3 obvious ones which were missing. Okay. One of them was company portal, conference portal, government portal, and retail portal. Now, in case you are on a company portal, you should be looking at moving to a community portal or a custom portal. Okay. If you are on a conference portal, you can look into moving to event management portal. So event management portal is a very separate portal that Microsoft has created. It's only available with marketing SKU, so you have to have marketing SKU in order to get an event management portal, but that's a very concrete. Our implementation, what we have seen that we see a lot of people managing events within CRM and using the portal, so I think this is a great solution. The other thing is government portal. So we had a government portal or a 311 portal which used to do permits and service request and a 311 kind of solution. That is no more an option with Dynamics 365 portals. For that, Adxstudio does have a Velocity 365 as a product, which you can look into leveraging, or it has to be a custom build that you'll have to do on top of using Dynamics 365. Retail portal itself has gone through a lot of challenges, and retail portal shopping cart feature is no more available in Dynamics 365 portal. And I feel anybody who is using the retail portal has most work to do in order to transition to Dynamics 365 portal because of the whole shopping cart feature, and it's a lot of work to implement it custom. Okay. But if you have a retail portal and you are looking for a shopping cart kind of feature, you need to look into custom portal or a custom solution as an option. Adxstudio has a Connect 365. There is an open source version of Connect 365 which is called Portal Buddy or Companion app. It's an open source version which allows you to have custom code or customizations on the Dynamics 365 portal itself. Okay. The open source version is released by Colin Vermander, who is an MVP with Microsoft. Okay. If you look into the feature-wise, so those were the portal website template-wise differentiation. If you look into the feature-wise differentiations, there's SharePoint integration, shopping cart, payment, event, issue management, service request. Those are the features which are not available, okay, with Dynamics 365. For event management, yes, they're not a feature of Dynamics 365 portal, but there is actually a separate portal you can get with marketing SKU, so that's your option. SharePoint integration has not been a feature that Microsoft has provided so far. Okay. It's a feature you can have today if you want using Connect 365, but Microsoft recently released the preview release notes, and SharePoint integration is coming to Dynamics 365 portal, which is a great news, and I believe it's coming in October 2018 release. So if you have SharePoint integration, and that has been one of the reasons why you have not migrated to Dynamics 365 portals, maybe you can re-look into that post October.
Hi, Kunal. There was just a question about the PowerPoint presentation and the recording being available to everybody after the presentation. I think we can do that, right?
Yes. So we will be sharing the presentation as well as the recording of the webinar will be distributed.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Upgrade options and methods. So what are my options? Like how do I go about upgrading? The method or the option for you to upgrade is highly dependent on how you actually implement it, right? If you implemented with a lot of code customization versus doing actually a configuration approach, you are likely looking into reimplementation, right? And how much you can migrate or re-implement is directly dependent on code customization. So you have heavy on customization, go for implementation. You have some customization with most of the other configuration, look into migration, look into options in order to have those customization working with Dynamics 365, either it's using Connect or re-implement as Liquid template. It's also dependent on what features you are using. So if you have a shopping cart, you have a tough part ahead. You will have to go look into custom solution. If you use retail portal only for payment handling, you have an easier path because you can achieve that using third-party solutions to have that custom payment handling within the portals. So you'll have to identify those and decide on your options based on those features. Now, one of the things I have not listed here, but which is the key, is if you're online or on-prem. That is the major deciding factor. Okay? If you are on-prem and if you're looking at a portal solution, you have to move online. You have to figure out your roadmap to move online and then look into using Dynamics 365 portal when you go online. And interim, if you need a portal solution, you need to look into either the open source code or the XRM portal community edition. The good thing about either of these portals is there is no licensing requirement, and it's easy for you to move from version 7 to these versions, as long as you are on Dynamics 365, 2016 version. Okay, so upgrade methods. The first written procedure for doing the portal upgrade was published by Colin. He had published a blog article highlighting how you can upgrade from version 7 to version 8.3. Since then, Microsoft has released a complete white paper document. It came out in February 2018. It provides two options. Number one being the re-implementation. Basically, you go and re-implement entire functionality again. Number two being the migration. Basically, you can do an in-place migration using PowerShell scripts. These are the two options which was available so far. What I am presenting today is the third option, which is a blend of re-implementation and migration using data migration tools. Okay? And you can use any data migration tool to do this, but I will be showcasing SSIS in order to do it. Why to do portal migration using data migration tool? Because it's an upgrade. Why to do a migration? One of the things is that with these version changes, some of the feature has gone away, some of the feature has got added, the structure and data model has changed, but the core logic or the core idea is still the same. In the Adxstudio world, we used to have web pages, page templates, web templates, entity forms, entity list, web forms. Those are still the core ideas that the portal has. The structure of having the data has changed in Dynamics 365, but the idea is still the same. We don't have an issue management option in Dynamics 365 portals anymore, but if you have another entity to facilitate that, you can actually build on that structure. So because the data structure is the major change in terms of the actual implementation, doing the migration using data migration tool makes sense. Now, we currently have in place migration script for the migrating to Dynamics 365, the one Microsoft has published, but still it is very data dependent. Many of the features don't work completely until you get the data right. It doesn't transform your comments into feedback. It does not. So if you have a lot of web pages which are deactivated, it logs them as active web pages into Dynamics 365 and partially active web pages. And there are a couple of other data. So like in Dynamics 365, everything is related with a website, but Adxstudio Portal it isn't. And when the transformation happens, it doesn't do that. So basically, it just creates a minimum viable Dynamics 365 operating solution using your Adxstudio Portals, and you obviously need more. Now, when you're doing migration using the migration script, you don't have much control. You will run the job, you can see the logs, but you don't have much control over the process itself. If you're using a data migration tool, you have a greater control. You have a control on what data is getting transferred. You can look into it, you can stop it, you can alter it, you can change it to suit the need for your implementation, rather than having a generic process which does the upgrade for you. And if you have something in a different order, it doesn't work. So the data migration tool approach gives you that facilitation. Current migration scripts works, but we don't know like how long it will be supported. So say for example, if you are on XRM called Portal Community Editions for some times, there could be a scenario when these migration scripts are not able to migrate to Dynamics 365 in future, and data migration tool will still work in this scenario.
Oh,
Okay.
Kunal, there's a question in the window.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what can be an example of unsupported templates?
Unsupported templates, so say for example, if you had from the website gallery, if you have installed a retail template or the Adxstudio retail website, then it's an unsupported template because retail website doesn't exist in Dynamics 365 world. Yeah, hope that answers.
Thanks.
Okay. So data migration using SSIS and Kingspaysoft. Those of you who are not familiar with SSIS, SSIS is a SQL Server Integration Service. It's a tool by Microsoft. It is a tool which runs off SQL Server. Okay, it's very tightly integrated with Visual Studio. The tool allows you to move stuff from one place to another place. It is built for migration or integration, and it allows you to transform the data to suit the destination structure, okay, and which is one of the things that we have to achieve in order to do the migration. So it's a very well-suited tool for complex transformation. Now, one of the demerits of SSIS, of course, is that SSIS doesn't actually provide a way for you to connect to Dynamics 365 or any version of Dynamics 365. For that, you will have to look into third-party connector. Okay, the connector that I am using today is the Kingspaysoft connector. Kingspaysoft is a great SSIS connector. It's very performance agnostic. It is also available as a cloud version now, and you can actually use Azure in order to run those rather than being dependent on having a VM for SQL Server. SSIS and Kingspaysoft together, in my opinion, is one of the best tools for migrating data to Dynamics 365. There are various ways to do the integration, and there are various tools which does that, but a combination of these two actually is very performant in order to do the migrations. All right, so let's look into actually doing the upgrade. Okay. The first step is, of course, the prep. Okay, you have to identify your customizations and look into implementing them as configuration. General example of customization is custom code, custom CSS files. You might have created a complete whole new MVC project within the master portal sample solutions, and you need to look into implementing that in a different way. Common example that I often see is people have modified the master pages. Okay, they've just modified the master pages, out of the box master pages, in order to achieve the functionality. Most of the time for the styling, sometimes for the features. Those are the areas you need to look into in your code and modification you have done. You have to identify unsupported features. So if you have, say for example, you are using event, right, and you are on a community website, then first thing you need to do is remove your references to the event issues or articles. Now, you can remove these dependencies beforehand or after. So you can actually remove them after the migration, and I'll actually show that. But if you want to do the more prep work beforehand, then you can look into that. This, if you're doing before, gives you the time frame in order to figure out what is your actually take or the solution in order to achieve that. Okay. Before you do anything, you want to back up your CRM, and then you want to actually create a sandbox. So before making any changes, make sure you do those. The assumption here is that you are already online at this point of time. Okay. If you are not online, then you have a lot of work to do to get online before you get to this. Unsupported component, right? So you have got code customization and you are using Liquid to do what you can do. But then there are some features which can't be done using the Liquid. There is a lot of guideline, especially by Colin on his blog, about how you can leverage Liquid in order to do a complicated custom development within Dynamics 365. But then there are some of the features that you can't do, like say for example you have portal integration, payment integration, or you have Azure integration. You can't do using Liquid templates. If you have one of those scenarios, then look into Portal Companion app or the Portal Buddy, the open source solution from Colin, or you can consider Connect 365, the full-blown solution using Portal Buddy, which is provided by Adoxstudio. Apart from that, there are other third-party solutions which are not listed here, which you can explore in order to achieve the unsupported features. All right. So did your planning, did your exercise, time to upgrade? Okay. The first, and these are the steps you will always have to do, is create a sandbox of your current dev environment. And on the sandbox, uninstall all your Adxstudio Portal solutions, so completely out of the sandbox. You might run into some of the issue because of the web notification plugins, so make sure you disable them. If you are on a version lower than 7.21, you might run into some of the other issues. The best bet is to upgrade it to 7.2 site solutions and do the install. Okay? That's what we have seen always, which helps. There are some of the dependency checker available in case there is some custom manipulation that you have done in your solutions. You can look into those dependency checkers as options in order to troubleshoot what are those options, and that will help you with the uninstall. The next thing to do is install the Dynamics 365 Portal solutions. So once you are on Dynamics 365 online, you can go to the application section within the admin window and install the Dynamics 365 Portal. Set up and configure the Dynamics 365 Portal based on the original portal used. So based on whatever portal that you have been using, set up. So say for example, if you have basic, install custom. If you had community, install community. And just based on the template mapping that I was showing is install those portals. Okay. Once you are done with that, so every time you install a community portal, it actually creates some dummy data for you. So for example, it will create some web pages, some of the content, or it will create some blogs and forums, which you actually might not need, right? So out of the box, it will create 2 blogs, forums, 2 ideas forums, and other forums as well. So you can look into it, what you don't need, and you can get rid of. Okay. All right. So let's look into actually doing the upgrade. Okay. So I have got a CRM here. This CRM is 8.2 Microsoft Dynamics 365, and I've got Adxstudio Portals installed on here. And I have community website. I created all of this a couple of days back. And you can see that I have a hosted version of community site running. This is just out of the box community website. Okay. Now I have done my environment prep. Okay. So I have a Dynamics 365 version here. And if I go to about, it says, and you can see that it is Microsoft Dynamics version 9, CRM Online. And I already have a portals installed, which is a community portal. Okay. So if I go, so I already have a community portal already installed on this machine. Okay. And you can, thought I had, yes, here's the portal. So this is version 9 out of the box, version 9 community edition. Okay. Now let's get to the package. Okay. Okay, sorry. Looking at the package, this is the package. This packages already exist on GitHub. I'll be sharing the URL towards the end of the session. The package is already on the GitHub and you can download and run with it. Okay. The package has some project parameters. So I have it already open. Then the one parameter here is source website. So you have to specify what is the name of your source website that you are migrating. Okay. There is a parameter on persist GUID. 95% of cases you don't want to change that, you want to make it true. But say for example, if you have multiple portal installed, you might want to set it to false. If you say set it to false, then actually it will create a new website rather than maintaining the GUID of the original, which is generally not ideal. Okay. Coming back to this, there is a connection manager. So there are two connection managers as required. Number one is the source, which is basically connect to the source CRM. I already have the values populated for my source CRM, and there is another one which is for the destination, and those values are already populated as well. Okay. While we go into the package, what I will do, I'll start the process. The process itself takes around roughly 4 to 5 minutes, and while the upgrade is happening, we'll go through the component of the package itself. Okay. So while it's triggered, so what you can see there is, these are called sequence blocks. So, like things happen in sequence 1, sequence 2. If you see in the first sequence, it is basically migrating the website, the content snippet, site settings, web roles kind of data. The second settings is basically migrating the accounts and contacts and other related details. Okay. You might not need some of them, so if you don't want, so for example, you created a sandbox copy of your original CRM, you already will have your accounts and contacts already there. You don't want to migrate them again. If you migrate, it will just update them. It will not create them again. So it's always upsert rather than actually a create. But if you don't need to do them, you can just right click on them and disable. So if you disable them, those steps won't happen, or the rest of the steps will continue. Okay. Moving down, we have portal entities. So there is all these portal entities: web template, page template, web pages, entity list, web forms, their metadata, the redirect settings. So those are the data flow components, which is actually migrating those of the other steps. Okay. They are not only migrating, they are transforming them in the process of migration. So say for example, when the entity list gets loaded, it gets loaded with the information about the website. Okay. Going down is the portal content, which is basically what you see is ads and blogs. I only have 2 portal content currently here, but this gives you an idea. Say for example, your requirement is to also migrate polls, then you can take the same idea from the ads and add the data flow for polls. If your requirement is to migrate ideas, you can take the same idea from blogs and migrate ideas, idea forums. Idea forums are nothing but blogs, and then idea post and the comments. It takes the comment and loads them as feedback entity into the CRM. Okay. So it seems like this is progressing fine. So while we wait for this to happen, is there any questions here?
There's one that I can see, Kunal. The question is, can you please show and comment on DTS part where language-specific content is ported, as well as entity permissions and web roles?
Sure. Let the job run, and then maybe we can just open one of, or maybe I can do it now, right? In terms of the web pages, so if I go into the web page migration, so you can see what it is loading. It is actually creating the root pages, okay? And once the root pages are created, it creates the root pages with only partial, so it doesn't maintain the parent information and others, and then it creates the sub-languages. Okay. The sub-language it creates is only English. It doesn't create all other languages. Okay. And you can see that there were 30 web pages which got created. If you want another language, you can add another data flow, which will actually transform the language. Okay. In terms of the web roles, it migrates all the accounts and the contacts. And once it has done the migration, it actually creates the web role and then updates the link. The reason I have the accounts and contacted added as part of the DTS itself is because if they are not available, the web role migration will fail and the association will be lost. Okay.
There's another question. Can I ask this one quickly, Kunal?
Sure.
So the question is, if the portal has a large amount of ASP.NET code, how do you suggest to approach this?
You need to carefully look into the implementation you have. You need to look into what they are trying to achieve, and is that possible to achieve that into using liquid template. Okay. And if so, then re-implementation using liquid template is an option. If it is not, then you will have to look into custom solution which will provide you such solution. So you can look into companion apps. Say for example, you had ASP.NET code in order to have an Esri integration. Then you can look into companion app to add the Esri integration piece into the it's very dependent on case-to-case basis. Adxstudio actually does an assessment program where they assess your current implementation and provide you guideline on what you can do or what are options you have, long-term, short-term. Okay, so if you want, you can look into that as an option. Okay, would you suggest to use SSIS and KingSphere for migration from ADX7 to Dynamics 365 portal? That's what I'm showing you. So that's definitely my suggestion. And yeah. Okay.
I have one more question in the chat box.
Okay.
Do we need to delete all existing data from entities like web pages, web template, etc., before running the packages to avoid duplication of data like 2 home pages, etc.?
I did not delete mine. I already had those home pages, so you don't need to delete them. You can let it be there. Once you are done with the implementation, any web pages that you don't need, you can get rid of them. Okay. So it seems like the package has completed. Hope that answers that question. The package is completed. So let me go to Dynamics 365. Okay. The first thing. The first thing what happens here is I have one of the issues that will pop up I already know about, so maybe I'll go and fix it, is homepage. So if I go to the home page, and you see there is not duplicated, there is still only one home page. And if I go to the home page, it's using a page template. And if I go to the page template, you see it is using a rewrite and using a rewrite URL. What Microsoft has provided with the community is, so this rewrite URL is actually referencing events. And we don't have any event entity. So if I load the page now, it will actually fail and it will actually error out. So what I'll do is I will remove the rewrite URL and change this to a web template and switch it to using out-of-the-box home pages. And save that. Let's reload and see how the portal functions now. Some of the time I do have to restart the web portal for like the changes to it take effect. Sometimes I'm lucky I don't need to restart and the portal works fine, and then we can load. While it is loading, if anybody has any question, feel free. Now is a good time.
I don't have anything new that's popped up so far in the chat box, so we're caught up.
Okay. How to handle cache invalidation? If you have the caching invalidation as an issue, you can actually go to the portal actions. And so actually there is a caching URL. You can go to that URL and invalidate the cache. Right. Dynamics 365 has a cache invalidation option. Does that answer the question, Ambisha, or you are trying to ask something else? Okay, here it is. Portal version 7 running on version 9. And as you can see, the Outlook has changed. Because I used the same home template, it is looking that way. I can go to the blogs, and that might look more like version 7. But if you see on the top, I still have events, right? And if I try to go to the events as a page, I will get an error message. Now, what you need to do is okay, so let's load and then we can see and talk about it, right? So now you look version 7 and this looks very much like version 7, just because I'm not using the template from version 9. And and if I go to the event, I get an error message. I'm only able to see this error message is because this is taking time, because I have disabled custom errors. So on the portal action, so once you have Dynamics 365 online, you can actually disable custom errors, and then you can actually see these errors. So once you have migrated, you can enable that option, and then as you are navigating through links, you can see why it is failing, what it is referencing, which is not available. So it is referencing an entity which doesn't exist, and that's what the reason it is failing. So you can look into how you want event management, or if you need event management actually. If you don't need them, you can get rid of the pages and remove the references. If you need to implement it, you can look into other options. Okay, I think the portal actions is loading here.
We have a couple more questions, Kunal. Do you want me to fire those off?
Sure.
Okay. Colin mentioned once that there are hidden redirect templates available at MS. Do you have a list of those?
I don't have the list, Vladimir, but shoot me an email, okay, and I will get the list to you. Implementation are different from ADX to Dynamics 365. Amisha, I believe you are asking in terms of the caching validation. Yes, so implementation are different, but it's basically still using the same logic. So say for example, when you installed Dynamics 365 portal, so I actually did not move any solutions. The solutions came with Dynamics 365. So those are already enabled for web notification. If you have other entities for which needs to be enabled for web notification, you can actually enable them using the Dynamics 365 process, which is basically going into the solution and enable it for notification. Okay, there is a very well documented document on that. Enable custom errors. So this was the option that I have enabled in order to get the error message showing up completely. If you need more detailed logging or details, you can actually enable diagnostic logging. So if you enable diagnostic logging, you will need Azure connections, and those Azure connections will actually, so all your logs will be set to Azure blob. So you need an Azure blob, and then you can take the connection string for that Azure blob and apply that here. Once you apply, all the loggings will directly go to the blob, and then you can actually go and look into the blob data in order to figure out what's going wrong. It's kind of very helpful when you are doing the upgrade, these two features. Okay. Now, let me go back to the slide. And I think there's a couple of questions, but we can tackle them after the slide. I'm almost towards the end. Okay. So that was the demo. Once the demo is done, as I was talking about the validation, disable custom errors on my Dynamics portal. So for your validation, disable the custom errors. Enable the diagnostic logging, okay. Validate styling and adjust, I have never found a very massive differentiation in terms of the styling or adjustment that is required for the styling, but there will be some that might be required, so you need to look carefully and make sure that works, okay. A complete regression testing, not only test that the feature that you need is working, but also say there is nothing else that you actually don't want. There is some random pages which are available which you actually didn't needed it, which came with the part of Dynamics 365. So validate, you can do a complete regression testing. Test and validate and deactivate pages that you are not using in the implementation. So if you have some pages that you are not using, then test them, validate them, and deactivate them. Okay, and that will help. Once you have completed this whole migration, you actually can take the implementation and move it to the environment. I like this approach because this allows us to validate everything in your development or test environment before you actually go and change things directly in production. Okay, the package is actually showcasing migration from Dynamics 365, Adxstudio to Dynamics 365 portal capabilities, but it could be used to move to XIM Community Edition as well, or to move to Open Source Edition as well, depending on your scenario. Okay. So you can look closely and see what you need to move, and then see a migration approach. The package is already on the GitHub, okay, and I will actually let me actually paste the link in the chat to everyone. So the package is already on the GitHub. You can go take it and roll it. You can use this as a starter package. So it's no way saying that this is a complete package. It's the starter package. You can modify, adjust based on your implementation to migrate. It does allows remapping and everything. I have listed a couple of benefits here. It's not an in-place migration. It migrates comments to new feedback entity. It sets the scope for access control rules. So it fixes some of the problems which were there with the migration script that Microsoft has actually provided. Okay. And that's one of the key. All right, that's the end of my session. If you guys have questions, so we can look into some questions now. And I have the details for the sales team for Adoxio listed here. I also have my blog URL listed here. You can reach out to me, or you can reach out to sales team if you need something in line with your assessment and your portal journey. Now let's look into what questions we have. Brandy, do we have more questions here?
Yes, I think we'll start with Vladimir's and then we'll go up to Joe. So Vladimir had a question from a little while ago. Also, we noted that many site settings that work in 7. I think it's XX are ignored in 9XX. Is there a map of supported site settings?
I have something, but it's not very detailed. What I can do, I can put that on my blog site later, and then you can actually grab it from there. Yes, the site settings have changed, especially around the auth model and some of the other differences. And you'll have to actually look. There is always a equivalent of Adxstudio site setting, so it's not like the setting has changed and moved to something else. There is always an equivalent here, which presents. But yes, a map. Yeah, we do have some map. I might be able to share it with you.
So there was a question from Joe. Have you ever come up with any functionality that cannot be re-implemented?
Cannot be implemented. I find the shopping cart is the main one of the challenge functionality. It's not that it cannot be re-implemented, but like as the saying is it worth to go into look into that kind of solution, or should you be looking into some other solution? So you'll have to do your assessment why you're using it. Most of the time what I find is that people are using shopping cart, but actually they didn't need a shopping cart. They just need an ability to select an item, have a fixed cost for that item, and pay for that item. More like a conference registration or event registration on those lines. If that's the use case that you currently have, then you look into the payment. Yeah, every customization could be done using the companion app or the Connect 365 and a couple of other solutions which are out there. So it's not that you will end up with not being able to implement a feature. It's the roadmap to that feature.
Okay, we have another question. How can we see what version of Adxstudio we are on? We are on Dynamics CRM 9.0 online, but built the portal over a year ago.
Right. Let me find the URL for you here, and I will give you the command. Is there any other question here, Danny?
Yes, I got another one from Joe. He's asking, where can we find more information on the companion app that you mentioned?
Okay. Okay, companion app, okay. It's listed on Colin Vermonder's blog, okay, and you can actually how do I get to the chat? Okay, so that's the blog post. I put the blog post here, and actually you can see the version by going to your portal URL _services_about. That's the URL you can go to. It currently shows the version of portal I have, and it is also showing the license. The same URL, if you go into Dynamics 365 version, it will look a little different. So let me bring that up here. So it is showing me the portal version. If I have the administrator web role, it will give me a button to clear the cache. And I believe there is also a new button in order to rebuild the search index, which is added recently. I'm not administrator, I'm not logged in, and that's the reason I'm not seeing those buttons, but otherwise you will get those two options as well here. Jerry, that answers your question? And I will put that. How do you find about what type of portal is being used, example, government or retail? Most of the time, what portal you are using, it's quite easily, you can see from the website itself, right? In some of the cases, what we have found is somebody has actually modified the website name, okay, making it a little bit of a challenge. And I'm looking into version 7. What I find in such scenarios is you can actually go to the website binding, and most of the time somebody has not taken an effort to modify all the bindings, and you can see the name. Those are the easy ways. Otherwise, you can just do a comparison of the features you have, and you'll know. Right. Also, you can actually find the GUIDs and then map that GUID and to see, okay, out of the box community edition, that was the GUID for the portal URL. What is the GUID for the website record that you currently have? Joe, does that answer your question? Yes, if your customer is on government, I do suggest you look into Velocity 365 as a solution, Joe. Velocity 365 is Dynamics 365 government solution, and it's much more than what it used to be. Adxstudio just released the version 2 of the Velocity 365. It's very cool. So look into that if you have the solution. You can use the migration scripts as a way to move from the solution to other. It's Velocity 365. I'll just go to the website and we can see here product and services, and there is Velocity 365. Okay.
Well, Kunal, we're approaching the top of the hour. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Laura.
Yep, I can hear you as well.
Yeah, great, thanks. Well, we're approaching the top of the hour, so I think we're going to need to wrap up here. If you do have other questions that haven't been answered, we'll make sure we get the transcript of the Q&A back to Kunal so he can get back to you individually. We did record today's session. I know a couple of you had asked about that, and we'll be sending that out within the next day or so to you as well. And if you would, just on your way out of the session, keep your eyes open for a very brief survey that will pop up. It only takes a couple of seconds to answer, and the feedback really does help us here at MSCW, and it helps our presenters as well. So, Kunal, Brandy, thank you very much for your time today. It was a great session, lots of really, really good information, and I hope everyone has a good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks everyone for joining today. Okay, and if you have any question, you can reach out to me. My contact details is on the screen currently, and it will be the part of the recording as well as slides. And I look forward to working with you. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for organizing all this.
Happy to.
Thanks.